have found 2 tampons, one in my husband's car and one in my sock drawer. I confronted him about this and he said it belonged to a coworker, which I knew is a total lie, so I installed hidden cameras and discovered that my husband's sister, who is a registered sex offender, was in my home with my children. Unsure whether to go through with the divorce or give him another chance. I am a 29-year-old female who has been with my husband, a 30-year-old male, for 7 years, and we have been married for 4 years. Throughout our relationship, I have never had any reason to suspect that he has been unfaithful to me or even remotely dissatisfied with our marriage. In fact, he likes to joke that we are still living in the honeymoon phase. Nearly 5 years and 2 children into our marriage. I would not have questioned his loyalty or our relationship if it had not been for a surprising discovery I made in his car last month. While I was buckling our daughter into her car seat, I noticed something slotted between the cushions of the back seat. I pulled it out and discovered that it was a tampon. This would not have seemed unusual had I not had an intrauterine device that has stopped my menstrual cycle for the past year, and I did not even recognize the style of the wrapper. I brought this to my husband's attention, and he did not seem to understand what it was, let alone why I was holding it, until I explained where I had found it and why I was almost certain it was not mine. He shrugged it off and said that it probably belonged to his coworker, Fiona. It is not uncommon for my husband to carpool to lunch with his coworkers, and we are both fairly close to Fiona and her husband, so I thought it was entirely possible that the tampon had slipped out of her purse whenever he had driven with them or offered her a ride. I dismissed it as no big deal. However, I put it out of my mind until we had dinner with Fiona and her husband a couple of weeks later. I genuinely wanted to believe my husband's explanation, but I just could not shake the image of how the tampon had been tucked into the seat and how my husband had seemed to show no regard for it whatsoever. I began to wonder if he was playing dumb. I did something that I now feel kind of crazy for doing. I faked an emergency and asked Fiona if she had any tampons while we were out together. She handed me one that was almost identical to the tampon I had found in our back seat, and I breathed a sigh of relief. So, the tampon, there was probably the same tampon here, and in all likelihood, there was an innocent explanation for why it had been left in the back seat in the first place. I thought I had seen the last of the misplaced feminine hygiene products until I found another tampon this morning. This time it was in my sock drawer. I feel physically ill at the thought of my husband having an affair, and I am even more nauseated at the idea that a woman might have left these tampons out for me to find. If it was my husband's coworker, why would she give herself away by offering me one the other night? In any other situation, I would want to talk to my husband about this, but I feel too sick and embarrassed to approach him with what I have found. What should I do? Date 1. Contemplating every possible source of 2 tampons has been my personal hell for the past few weeks, but I wanted to share an update. Shortly after posting on here, I confided in my sister about what had happened. I recounted the story of the tampon in the back seat and the sock drawer, my husband's cluelessness, the tampon from Fiona, and all the suspicions I had that I did not want to believe. We compared the tampons, excluding the one in the back seat that I had already discarded, and they were a match, differing only in absorbency. I had not left either in a place where my husband or daughters would have found them and moved them around. My daughters did not know what they were or where they had come from. My sister was convinced that it was Fiona, either having an affair with my husband, messing with me, or both. Directly confronting either party still seemed like a bad idea, so she suggested inviting Fiona and her husband over for our Labor Day barbecue. Unfortunately, they already had plans. My sister and I agreed that it was too soon for hidden cameras without any other evidence, so it became a waiting game. I began observing my husband for any behavioral changes. There were none. Checking our house for any misplaced or foreign items. There were none. And even paying attention to the girls for any new friends they might have met. My sister's husband was adamant about this last point, and partly why he was inclined to believe that the tampons were harmless. If anything had been happening in or around our home, he asserted, it would be nearly impossible to keep it from me and the girls since my husband was the one taking them to and from daycare and most other activities during the week. I found some consolation in that. It was not until my younger daughter, who was 2 years old, came down with something last week that I began to feel differently. I wanted to be the one to stay home and take care of her, but my husband insisted that I stay at work while he stayed home with her. I was okay with that. My sister and her husband figured it was a good sign that he would take the time off at a moment's notice, and by that point, we were all beginning to put the tampon fiasco behind us. By the 3rd or 4th day, I was just happy to see a nearly healthy child and a husband who was helping her through it. Toward the end of that week, however, I came home to something strange. The toddler I had left that morning in an old pajama set was now dressed in a onesie I had never seen before, with a tiny clip in her hair. I cannot say I have the sharpest memory, but I have a pretty good sense of what my children wear on a day-to-day basis, particularly the kinds of clothes they have. I had sworn off full-length sleep suits with snaps across the front long before we had our second child because the long snaps are just a pain to deal with during diaper changes, in my opinion. It is simply not something I would dress her in, and my husband knows that. He does not plan for or buy the girls' clothes, nor does he accessorize them, so I was bewildered and somewhat floored at the thought of someone being around our sick child without my knowledge. I did not think twice, and I went straight to my husband to ask if anyone had been over to see him or the girls. He seemed confused, as he had been before, and asked me why I would think that. He insisted it had just been him and the children all day. I asked him again if someone had so much as stopped by to say hello, and he denied it. He told me to calm down. I might have lashed out and confronted him with my suspicions right then and there, but our older daughter was in the room, and she sensed something was wrong. In a calmer voice, I asked him a third time if anyone had been around our children, and my husband swore that the girls had not been around anyone but him. He also denied buying new clothes or doing anyone's hair. With our daughter in the room and my emotions in disarray, I decided to leave it. I could not make sense of it then, and it hardly seems clearer now, after driving myself half crazy with explanations that do not add up. Update 2. After nearly losing my mind over a hair clip and a onesie, I realized I was not getting anywhere with accusations and half-baked guesses. I had become so absorbed in the paranoia and misery of my situation that I was not sleeping, eating, or caring for my children the way I should have been. I was also not getting any answers. So, I decided to proceed with the installation of hidden cameras and had them shipped to my sister's house, with my brother-in-law agreeing to assist with the setup in my home. Before the cameras were ever delivered, however, I received the long-awaited confirmation I had been waiting for last week. A ring notification alerted me to motion at the front door while I was at work. I half expected to see a delivery person, a pet, or a lawn care worker for the 15th time. You can imagine my surprise when I saw a clip of a young woman leading my daughter into the house hand in hand, with my husband and other daughter close behind them. The girls were supposed to be in daycare and my husband was supposed to be at work. The woman, to my knowledge, was living 2 states away with a court order preventing her from being there. I immediately called my husband to ask him what this woman was doing in our house. He did not answer, so I texted him. Even in his ignorance, he probably realized he had messed up by coming through the front door, knew I had received the ring notification, and wanted to delay the inevitable confrontation. After the 5th or 6th subsequent call, however, he finally picked up. The woman on the camera was my husband's sister. As I would later find out, she was the likely source of both tampons, the onesie, and the hair clip. She is also a registered sex offender and a recovering addict, who spent the better part of her adolescence and young adulthood coercing the silence of another one of my husband's family members after she had molested them. I had not seen or heard from her in years, and based on the way my husband spoke about her, I did not expect I ever would. But here she was in our house with our children. To say that I was livid would be an understatement. It was not an affair at all, and yet it was somehow infinitely more disgusting to know who it was and why all of this had been happening. Apparently, my sister-in-law, fresh out of another stint in rehabilitation, had wanted to reconnect with her brother. And according to my husband, he wanted to help her out. So he invited her to spend time with the kids while he had taken a couple of days off work. I later discovered that he had even tried to cover it up by lying about taking time off, but he still refused to admit it was wrong. He argued that he needed to help his sister despite her past. He was just trying to be a good person. I did not want to hear it. When I confronted him, he insisted that he would never let her be alone with the children, and he assured me that I had nothing to worry about. He said he felt guilty about not being there for her before, and that he simply wanted to show that he cared. I cannot remember a time I felt more sick to my stomach. I told him I wanted her out of our lives and our home, that I was furious and disappointed he would even consider letting her around our children. I told him I was filing for divorce, and he begged me to reconsider. He claimed he was only trying to help, but he still refused to acknowledge that what he did was wrong and that it could have put our children in danger. I have filed for divorce, and the rest of my family is shocked by what has happened. My husband has been begging for forgiveness, but I cannot shake this feeling of betrayal. I am completely torn between wanting to do what is best for our daughters and having a little piece of me that still wants to forgive him. He was trying to help her, but I can't shake the feeling that I can't trust him anymore. Should I let go of my anger and give him another chance to change? Or should I remain firm in my decision to divorce him? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more interesting stories and perspectives, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Don't miss out on more interesting videos. Click the video on your screen to check out my previous interesting content. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below. See you in the next video.